Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou is now official, with these two combat sports icons set to meet in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on October 28th. It's the collision of the lineal heavyweight champions of both boxing and MMA. And despite some early confusion, it is now confirmed that this will be a professional, not an amateur matchup. With that in mind, let's take a deeper dive and break down everything you need to know about Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou. So, how did this bout come to pass? Well, in an era where big business novelty matchups are becoming more and more common, it's only natural that the biggest stars in both combat sports would want a slice of that pie. And for Francis Ngannou, his relationship with the UFC was all but ruined by the time he decided that enough was enough. The UFC and Dana White in particular had always had a tense relationship with Francis ever since his initial failure to beat Miocic at UFC 220. But when he started speaking publicly about issues of fighter pay and freedom within their contracts, he immediately became a major enemy of the promotion. And so, despite the looming presence of a massive fight with Jon Jones, Ngannou opted to test himself on the free agent market, voicing his interest in both mixed martial arts and boxing. Some thought that Ngannou was pricing himself out and that he had just let a legacy-defining bout with Jones slip away. But here's where it gets interesting. Just when it seemed as though Francis had fumbled the bag, he managed to secure a unique deal with the PFL that would see him act as not just a fighter on their roster, but as a pivotal figure in their move to take control of the African MMA market. And before the dust had even settled on that revelation, rumors linking Ngannou to a bout with the most decorated heavyweight in boxing, Tyson Fury, began to circulate. All of a sudden, the narrative switched. Despite Dana's best efforts to try and paint what Francis was doing as a gimmick, the public slowly started to realize that Ngannou had beaten the system, finding himself a rare win against an enemy that has rigged the game in their favor. But for as much as Francis is getting major credit for sticking it to Dana and the UFC, fans of heavyweight boxing have been left disappointed by this revelation. Tyson Fury has earned himself some real good faith from the fans in recent years, growing from an unheralded sideshow within the heavyweight mix to a champion, a role model, and an era-defining talent. But despite taking on Deontay Wilder in an amazing trilogy, the question of unifying the titles against Alexander Usyk seemed to be next in line. Naturally, the boxing world were left thrilled by this news, with many calling it the most significant heavyweight pairing in years. So, when negotiations broke down and Fury almost immediately jumped over to a matchup against an MMA fighter, even his own supporters were left with some real questions. All of a sudden, Fury versus Ngannou was set for a Saudi Arabia date in October. And while there were talks about 4-ounce glove boxing, hybrid rules, or even an exhibition fight, it does appear as though we're getting the real thing here. Pro boxing, likely 12 rounds, and nothing stopping either man from claiming this victory on their professional record. Details are scarce, but as things stand, it's not certain if Fury's belts will be on the line for Ngannou to potentially win. But let's be real, that's a long shot. Most fans would agree that this fight will go on only as long as Fury allows it to. Sure, Ngannou has that nuclear option in his fists, but we just watched Tyson deal with the most formidable power puncher in the sport, Wilder, over 3 fights. Francis is going to have a very slim puncher's chance, sure, but if there's one thing that Fury has added to his game on this more recent run, it's his own knockout punch ability. So while a lot of MMA fans are happy for Ngannou, the response from the boxing world has not been nearly as kind. Usyk's manager had a pretty quick reaction to the fight's announcement, calling the fight a joke and a circus. And it's a sentiment that is echoed by most boxing fans. We have the opportunity to see the two greatest heavyweights of the era throwing down, and instead, we get this. Tyson himself made a brief statement over Twitter, making a pretty general comment on the fight. But all in all, the story here is primarily about Francis. Overall, it served as a massive play by Ngannou and his team, proving once again that he is more than capable of moving out of the shadow of the UFC. And though the bad blood remains, this is definitely a big win for him. He even made a very funny dig at Dana, opting to name his fight promotion Gimmick Fight Promotions. Expert-level trolling right there.
It's International Fight Week here in Vegas, so it is the perfect time to announce another badass fight.
And if you think Dana White and the UFC were going to take this news sitting down, think again. In classic Dana fashion, he decided to try and outgun Ngannou's fight announcement by immediately announcing the long-awaited showdown between their own heavyweight champion Jon Jones and the division GOAT Stipe Miocic. It's a tactic they often employ to drown out the competition. And it's not the first time Dana has tried to downplay the achievements of his competitors. But as far as the details are concerned, that's just about all we know so far. The bout is seemingly signed, and both men will no doubt take home 8-figure paydays for their efforts. But what do you think about this wild crossover bout? And what's your exact prediction for this heavyweight collision on Fight Night? Be sure to let us know your takes in the comments section below.